unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J, co-hosting with me in the future, should I say, where it's actually in London the following day. It is now Wednesday, 3 a.m. Johnny Webb is joining us. And as always, we have a fascinating show, but today is an extra special show because we do have someone who I've looked up to for several years, a true investigative journalist. Normally, this is the time I would go through the news with you, but I figure, why do it alone when I could do it with a top journalist in the world? And with that being said, let's introduce our guest tonight. And that would be the one and only Linda Moulton Howe. Miss Howe, welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Dr. J. It's good to be back.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. Well, this is the big news that's been making headway since Saturday. There's this anomalous picture, actually video even exists, of what looks like a white and bluish cone sort of thing. And a lot of people even called in 911 in Southern California, all the way down from San Diego, all the way up to Ventura, as you know, visibly even further eastward. And on top of that, people were truly thinking this was an unidentified flying object, which it was unidentified in that sense, but they thought they were looking at an extraterrestrial craft. Then comes out the military, the U.S. Navy says that they were conducting a test of their Trident missile. And I know you have a contact in the Navy that you got some info that you can probably settle the score once and for all those who've been wondering about this since Saturday night.
Yeah, and I have information coming to me through Facebook, Twitter. Earthfiles.com is my Facebook, Twitter, and to my website, earthfiles@earthfiles.com, dozens and dozens of people were emailing Saturday to Sunday saying that they were, whether it was Los Angeles, San Francisco, Arizona, even some people in Idaho, some eyewitnesses in Mexico, and they were sending, in many cases, images saying, we are seeing this going from south to north. And I posted at earthfiles.com one of the 6 o'clock Pacific time beautiful images that was taken by a girl named Amanda Ewing Rice. And KRON-TV, a producer there, contacted me as this was all going before we knew it had anything to do with the Navy, and KRON TV in San Francisco sent me some images and sent me some emails they were getting and saying, Linda, what do you think of this? So I felt like I was in the middle of the swirl going almost from the beginning, and I'm looking at these photos. I'm looking at the first videos coming in, and people, I asked one man, where are you? And he gave me the intersection in San Francisco, and I said, your back is which direction, your face is which direction? And he said, my back is to the east, my face is to the west, and this is traveling from south to north. Everybody said that, south to north. And one of these photographs that was taken by Amanda, it looks like an umbrella flying in the sky with a turquoise blue center pole, and then this greenish bluish kind of umbrella top with it, where the very tip top of the umbrella would be a bright, brilliant white. And most everybody was saying, we've never seen anything like this before, and I was getting a lot of emails from people who were male, who had been in the military, and they kept saying this doesn't look like a Trident or any missile trying to eliminate possibilities. So this went up at Earth Files having to do with what is this mystery rocket that is moving from the Los Angeles, Orange County area going south to north. And that was what everybody was asking. By 11 p.m. my time on Saturday, I received word through KRON-TV, who were tied into the California Law Enforcement and Airport Network, and they said that the Orange County Sheriff and the Coast Guard down in Orange County had confirmed that this bright blue stem inside of this white glowing object was, in fact, a classified launch of a Trident II D5 missile, and that when they said and reported on Saturday night that it had come from Point Mugu Naval Base as a missile, I have subsequently learned that would be the controlling operational source for what happened, but that the actual launch of this missile, and now I'm going to read from an email that I got today answering a lot of my questions from a retired Navy captain, Mark Wood, who now is based in Boca Raton, Florida. He helped me on the underground Alaska story. He has helped me on several things. He did this for a living for more than 2 decades in the Navy, studying launches, being able to work on various kinds of global latitude and longitude issues. And here it was his first answer to my question about where exactly did this launch from the Navy point of view. He said, you had the launch on Saturday, which was approximately 6 p.m. Pacific, and then you had another launch on yesterday afternoon during the daylight hours, and both launches were from the USS Kentucky, not from an island. Even the sheriff's office had indicated on Saturday that it was an island. It was not. It was the USS Kentucky. Now, where is the USS Kentucky, or was it? The Southern California Operating Area for Fleet Exercises, Airborne ASW exercises, and air subsurface exercises is a significant distance off the coast out going west from Los Angeles. This is why no one heard the missile. That was one of the puzzling things, too. I had sent an email to people saying, are you hearing any sound? And everybody was saying no. Now, if you have been to, say, Cape Canaveral to watch a Saturn or Space Shuttle launch, you know that it must be what happened on Saturday and what happened on yesterday, that it had to have been at a great distance from the ears and minds of people who were observing with their eyes if they couldn't hear anything, because anywhere in the Cape Canaveral area, when there have been launches there, I've seen a couple. It's very loud. It's very earth-shaking. Now, because we're on an Earth, it's a sphere. That means there's a curvature of the horizon. And by the time that the people on the shore going, whether it was Mexico, Southern California, up San Francisco, even up further north, people on the shore did see, he says, engine flames, and that this would be the orange color that has confused everyone. And by that time, he says the missile would have been at a very significant altitude. It travels at 13,600 miles an hour from launch.
Wow.
Now, yeah. So now, if you then, and I've got a map in front of me. If you look at the Southern California coastline going up from far south past San Diego, it actually does not run north-south. It's a dogleg, and the dogleg comes into northern Mexico, and for the most part, we don't think about that. We just think of Southern California up to Vancouver as running south to north. But it runs for this period going from Santa Barbara and San Diego going north. It actually moves at a 140 to 320 degree line, and that means that you are, wherever you are in San Diego, and you are looking up toward land and out to the sea, you are not focused on a perpendicular going up to Los Angeles. You are looking out, and he's assuming, the Navy captain, retired, is assuming that, in fact, people in that southern part of California would be looking about 230 degrees out to the west in the Pacific Ocean. And then he said, I don't know the exact position of the missile launch, but for argument's sake, let's put it at, and he provided an image with a red dot that I'm going to put all of this up with the graphics that he sent not very long ago to Earth Files, and so it'll be at my website probably sometime tomorrow or Thursday. And it's not running parallel to the observer line of sight, and that this was due to the fact that the brightness of this engine flame was remaining bright enough and constant enough that people standing on the shore could not really judge both the degree of distance going toward the west and the height of this object. All they could see was the perceived motion going from what they thought was sort of left to right, south to north. And then the observers then assumed that what they were seeing was something moving south, straight north. The very fact that people in Idaho were reporting it certainly reinforced for me that this was a south to north direction. But it turns out from an interview that the Washington Post did today and released, they interviewed a person in the Navy about this, and it turns out, and nobody seems to be arguing with this, that the missile was actually going west, and if you go southwest from Los Angeles, you're heading toward Australia, and you are heading down to the Papua New Guinea region, and this Kwajalein Island, which is where they say that it either landed or hit the water, is northwest of Papua New Guinea, or far southwest of the coast of California. And every time I go through the very necessary and important exercise of my questions and audience questions on these phenomena, and go to people who have served in military or some capacity where they are really familiar with what is happening with arcs, orbital mechanics, the physics of the Earth, it is always an educational revelation. I enjoy learning why we all thought it was going south to north, all the way up to Idaho, when in fact, according to these calculations, it was actually flying west and turning south, and none of us on land-based had that perspective. Now, this raises, though, John, a really important question. You look at the map and you look at the headlines that all piled up on November 7th, and that was, you had this launch at 6 o'clock, which caused a huge social media sensation. Earlier that same day, I posted at my news website, earthfiles.com, breaking news. Secret military operations have closed airspace from LAX west over the Pacific through the coming week. When we got that news on the morning from TV stations, I got it from a TV station in the morning of November 7th, from ABC7 in LA, they didn't have an answer to why. Nobody in the military was talking, and the police didn't know. They just said mysterious military maneuvers over the Pacific are forcing a change in Los Angeles International Airport landings late at night, meaning noise for thousands of people in the flight path, close quote. Well, that morning, it made no sense. By the 6 o'clock social media furor, several people were beginning to say to me, and I was sitting here looking at my own headlines thinking, Could there be some relationship between closing the airspace going west out of LAX into the Pacific for an entire week and whatever is behind whatever has been launched? Now, today, I talked with somebody who also is a different military person, and they said they think that these two are probably really tightly linked. And the sheriff didn't have any information, and LAX didn't have any information that they gave out publicly only, about 6 hours before the 6 p.m. launch on the November 7th. So look at the disconnect of how people were so affected. Some people were scared. Why couldn't they, in the morning, have simply announced, we are going to be doing naval exercises. We're going to be testing Trident II because we have changed something. So if you see some beautiful blasting thing in the sky over the Pacific, it's us, America. It's your Navy. We are testing, right? Wouldn't that have been wonderful for us all to have been given an honest headline in connection with closing down planes going west? Now, confusing this situation, an attorney that I know was in Los Angeles this past weekend said that even though there were those headlines about the fact that Los Angeles International Airport would have the airspace closed going west, he said they took off from LAX, went way out over the Pacific Ocean on Saturday. And he said, what does it mean? They didn't affect our airline. So what really was happening on Saturday? So that's another question mark. Now, the third part, also part of the headlines in various worldwide news operations Friday and Saturday. At Earth Files, I posted WT 1190F, I'm doing it the polite way, space junk due to impact Indian Ocean November 13th, this coming Friday. Now, normally, I would take astronomers, planetary geologists, the Near-Earth Orbiting Objects Office at NASA. I would take them for their word. I would take it as an honest release. But here is the part that is becoming so puzzling to understand. And again, this involves the point of India, where Sri Lanka is, right at the southern tip of India, because they're calling this, what other people are saying, what the F, another 9/11, WT 1190F.
Yeah.
They're saying this was not even seen or known to this planet. I'm going to say not to anyone. Who knows anymore? I'm just going to say it was not general world news until about 2.5 weeks ago. For the first time, nobody had ever heard or seen of this. And then we learn that the University of Hawaii's 2.2-meter telescope, that is very fine and used by some of the world's best astronomers, in early October had taken an image, means a photographic image, digital image, from the University of Hawaii of an object that they then declared to be unidentified space junk on a highly elliptical orbit from beyond the moon. Well, now let's just talk for a second about this highly elliptical orbit. It is defined as being in an orbit twice as far away as the Earth-Moon distance of 242,000 miles. That means when it was seen for the first time, it was 500,000 miles from the Earth, but on the backside of the moon. I don't mean the physical backside of the moon. I mean behind the moon. We couldn't see through the moon to see this object for apparently as it was approaching. And then suddenly Hawaii was able to get this image, and they estimated, and this seems so strange, they estimated that the length of this thing that is in this image is 6 feet long, about 2 meters. And that they had calculated in the last 2.5 weeks that it was going to hit in the Indian Ocean about 40 miles, 65 kilometers, from Sri Lanka, which is right off the southern tip of India, at 11:50 a.m. local time there on Friday, November 13th. Nature, the journal Nature, has done a huge article about this, and they did that on October 23rd. And I have the hot link to that journal article at Earth Files. Well, you stand back and you think a orbital elliptic that is twice the distance from the Earth to the moon is an object that is still being described as mysterious Earth space junk. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. What is it that is coming in from far away, having come from the direction, if you could look through the moon, it was coming from someplace, and will be crashing into the ocean on Friday? I just wonder, and so do some other people, could all of this be tied together?
That's a very good point. And when you brought up LAX, one major thing is, as you know, that from the attorney that you talked to who flew from LAX, it was after the launch. I think it was only Sunday when they initiated this blockout, where normally what would happen between midnight and 6 a.m., they would fly from to avoid the causing noise and more noise pollution to all the residents in the area surrounding LAX, that instead of flying over the Pacific Ocean and then getting towards altitude and traveling eastwardly, that they were just to fly in a westwardly position. But again, you have evidence that contradicts this. The other thing I want to say is something coming from the other side of the moon. Although I can never get him to confirm this, actually confirm it, other than say he speculates this. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who I know you've talked to as many times, probably more than me. Most recently, the last interview I did with him, he actually says there's a good probability that there is an extraterrestrial base on the other side of the moon. And that
yes. Oh, John, I've heard this from so many people over the last 3 decades about this base on the far side of the moon. And I want to tell you something very interesting about this in relationship to Neil Armstrong. But let's just make sure that you and I and the audience, that we're on the same square here. When I was using the words from the far side or backside of the moon, what I meant was this object was 500,000 miles away when they first found it, and the literature says it was coming from 500,000 miles away, from behind the moon. Do you know why? It's hard to find the language. It isn't at the moon. It isn't on the physical far side of the moon. It's out in space, but traveling toward the Earth, coming on an orbit that is coming toward the moon, but it's not hitting the moon. It's going to come by the moon and hit in the Indian Ocean. So it isn't physically on the moon or hitting the moon or being on the moon. It's just coming from that far place. Now, I would like to share something that I've always thought of on these issues of what exactly is inside the moon, the backside of the moon, and so forth. When I was working as supervising producer on the series Sightings, and this was with Paramount, and we were the production unit at Paramount Studios in L.A. That was in 1990, and I was there for about 4 or 5 months working on what became UFO Report Sightings, and then it became the Sighting series. And one of the segments that we wanted to do was about astronauts who had seen unidentified objects in space and were willing to talk about it on camera. And in the process of, at the top of my list as a producer, was to try to interview Neil Armstrong, the first man who stepped on the moon, and he had been so silent and so mysteriously non-public since he had returned from the moon. So I was able to get in touch with a pilot who had been a good friend of Neil Armstrong's back at their very early ages, in their early 20s, when they were both jet pilots. And that man sat down and said, look, I'll tell you why I don't think he will ever talk to you or anybody. And that was such a shock. And why? I mean, he's the first man who stepped on the moon. And the pilot said, well, he and I are really good friends, and I've known him since we were young. And he said after he got back from the moon, and you know, he did do a ticker tape kind of parade.
Yes.
I think he did that much. And then he just disappeared from the public.
I'm so glad you actually mentioned that, because for 20, 30 years, I thought the guy was dead, literally, until he popped in the headlines when he did pass away.
That's right. No, he was very much alive when I was trying to produce this segment for sightings at Paramount in the spring. It would have been the spring of 1990, because our broadcast of the pilot was October of 1990. So I'm now, my ears are glued to what is he going to tell me is the reason that Neil Armstrong would never tell the story of getting to the moon to television. And he said, I finally was invited to his house, and as I walked in and we're walking down a hall to go to a living room, he said, Linda, there wasn't one photo of astronaut anything. And here I'm with the historic, forever face.
Oh, we seem to have dropped her. Everybody hang tight. We'll bring her right back. It's you that was knocked off, and everybody else is still here. But you were literally just saying, as you were walking in the hallway and you saw no photos, and then you got cut off.
I wonder, how am I selectively disconnected by these, whatever it is that monitors us? Anyway, that's a shame. But here, so we're walking down, he is walking down the hall in the house with Neil Armstrong, and they sit down, and he asks him why he doesn't have any photos of his astronaut days, and he said that Neil Armstrong looked down at the floor and then said with a low voice, something like, there were 3 of them over the crater, and they ordered me to move the LEM. Remember that? The LEM, how it moved suddenly with all the dust?
Yes.
For those who watched the 1969 landing, as you're coming down, NASA was on a delay. A lot of people don't realize that. There was, I think it was a 5 or 7 second delay, right?
Oh, absolutely, because you had to send the signal from the moon.
Yeah, so the way the pilot is explaining it, because I remember this dramatically, they're coming down, and then all of a sudden there is you see motion and movement and dust, and the NASA radio guy was giving the play-by-play says, there was something about the ground was going to be too rocky, so they turned the LEM to land in a smoother place. And the pilot says that was not
Eagle,
true.
you're looking great. Coming up 9 minutes.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Altitude 5,200 feet.
Manual attitude control is good.
Roger, copy.
Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over.
Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet.
Copy.
Alarm. 1201.
1201.
Roger, 1201 alarm. Where go? Same type. Where go?
2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the ag, 47 degrees.
Roger.
47 degrees.
Eagle looking great. Your go.
Altitude 1,600. 1,400 feet, still looking very good.
Roger, 1202. We copy it.
35 degrees. 35 degrees. 750. Coming down to 23. 700 feet, 21 down. 33 degrees. 100 feet down at 19. 540 feet down at 30 and at 15. At 400 feet down at 9. Gate forward. 10 and 50 feet down at 4. 30, 3.5 down. They're pegged on horizontal velocity. 300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward. Put up. On 1.5 down. 70. Got the shadow out there. 50 down at 2.5. 19 forward. Altitude, velocity, light. 3.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. 160 feet. 6.5 down. 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. 120 feet. 100 feet. 3.5 down. 9 forward. 5%. 185. Okay, 75 feet. Car's looking good. Down a half. 6 forward.
60 seconds.
Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Great shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drifting to the right a little. 20, down a half.
30 seconds.
Forward. Just. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Mode control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're looking good here.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
That what all that was about, if you go back and look at whatever videos out there now of that landing, that when the LEM suddenly moved in a kind of a jerky way and there was a lot of dust, that it was because Neil Armstrong and the other guys saw 3 silver discs lined up over a crater that would have been seen by the camera, and they communicated with NASA that there were 3 things there, and NASA said, turn the LEM. And they landed in that chaos because there were 3 silver discs parked in the air over a nearby crater.
And there's actually some great NASA footage, though some people believe was hoax, but it appeared in this very famous documentary from the early 90s, UFOs Above and Beyond, where it actually showed these giant objects parked literally right by a crater, one of the several craters on the moon. Now, here's the anomaly that I never
Can we just
understood.
ask a question here for the audience and pose it? I've seen the same photos, and what I have wondered, are they created in some kind of a Photoshop for people to put up at websites to get clicks to make money? So many people are doing that. I think it's unethical. But people are doing that. And so it makes it so hard for those of us who are trying very hard to understand what the facts are. The story, I completely believe from the pilot. But I don't think that any of those real photos have been leaked, have they? Wouldn't these be something Photoshop based on hearing stories like what I just told you?
Why is it that Buzz Aldrin does a lot more talking? As a matter of fact, he appeared in a very famous movie, a very fictional movie, Transformers of all that. I mean, that was a child's toy. I remember that one in the early 80s. It was very popular, that and I think Tron or Voltron or something like that. But regardless, Transformers, he appeared in it, and with a very straight face in I think it was the second part or the third part. I don't remember which of this part of the series, because there have been so many at this point. He actually came in the movie and said that when him and Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, that they encountered an unknown species, an extraterrestrial species. Now, again, this was in a movie. Why would they allow him to say such a thing? I mean, wouldn't it discredit NASA?
Well, see, I don't know. What I just told you was from a pilot. He would be then firsthand, right, to the story. He was there with Neil Armstrong as a buddy in Neil Armstrong's house. So that's what you call first-hand testimony. He was one of two people, and he's describing. And you really, to make a strong, credible story, you usually need everybody that's involved. You want to go on the record, but we never could get Neil Armstrong, which sort of reinforced what the pilot said. Now, when you jump to somebody saying that they heard about X occurring, then you are removed from the first hand. And that's why right now, the web and the internet, it is so filled with what I call chaff. It's in all of us every day now who are interested in actual facts and news. One of our biggest challenges is separating out what is real and what is not real, because you got all these people that want to just put a headline up. They don't really care what, just so people will click on their website. Even if people are disgusted after they click on the website, then that person is adding up those clicks for money. And we need to be in a more ethical world where facts are given some respect, and that we really know that we're going to legitimate news. Well, that's why, in my case, I have a very short list. Anything that comes up that appears to be over the top, I always check with what The Guardian is reporting, what the BBC is reporting, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a couple of others, and then have my own military and intel sources to get in touch with on cases that might be controversial in that area, because you can't trust the web anymore.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's actually a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have this free flow of information where anybody can be a movie producer via YouTube. For every minute watched, I was told by a YouTube advisor that there are 300 minutes or 300 hours uploaded. That is just an astronomical number. And I'd say 30 years ago, before people had the ability to create blogs and to create stories or to create websites that glorify stories that are chaff, the way you put it. That's where the double-edged sword comes from. So on one hand, we have the free flow of information. On the other hand, forgive me for saying this, we have the crap that comes in that
Right.
really just muddies the water for us trying to get to the sources.
And I'll give you another part of the internet world today that is so unfair, and that is I know how hard that I work on trying to understand and report in difficult subject areas such as the alien presence as it has been described by various people, politically, military, and intel on this planet, and all of the ramifications that fall out from those two words, alien presence. And that ranges from technologies, back engineering, what types, to what end, what agendas, who's friendly, who's not, how deep are the cover-ups, how deep are the layers of the games that are being played. And then I will, out of lots and lots of interviews and reading and research and in the field, there are certain things that begin to crystallize in my own mind as being a reality that is not really in the radar of the planet. That doesn't mean that it's not a reality, because when you get into the whole world of whistleblowers and people in human abduction syndrome, a person who is in an investigative role as I am, you hear the largest bell-shaped curve of everything possible. And I have tried to report only what I feel like I have some credible context for. And I think one of the most important subjects that we all need to understand more about in order to understand whatever the alien presence is, has to do with the what I call alien self-activating software. And that ties to the 2007 whistleblower Isaac and the Dragonfly drones and the diagrams that are the mathematical basis for self-activating software that do not need organic intelligences in craft or the technology, that they are made to be self-activating, can move through the universe, can beyond Earth, and we'll call it the prime intelligence doesn't have to be with it. I am convinced this is one of the most important facets, and it relates to symbols, being able to touch symbols that provoke the self-activating software to respond. And these are all of those descriptions going back to the 50s and the 60s in the 20th century, when people said the craft seemed to be alive. It acted as if it were a conscious, sentient being. Those were many descriptions going back to those far decades, and nobody had any context for understanding. Today, the alien self-activating software explains how you could have an entire craft. Whatever the substrate is made of, you've got molecular programming, and that it is dense and can produce three-dimensional holograms, neutralize gravity, can make the craft or the beings, if there are beings, and they're not necessary, make the craft invisible. Those would all be functions of a self-activating software created by very, very sophisticated intelligences to have technologies that could interact with and harvest genetic material from planets, not just Earth, and basically not have to interface with Earth life unless they wanted to, because they're largely invisible and they can neutralize gravity. Now, that to me is a story that is worth sharing with the public, hoping for more whistleblowers. Yet every time that I bring something to bear about that, like the recent case that has come out of what is called Wadley, Georgia, I think it's a substantial case. But you just feel like that there are counterintelligence operatives out there just waiting to slam the heck out of me and anyone who treads into this subject matter that they do not want reported. And I think all of us need to understand that we already, in the United States, that we have back-engineered technology from extraterrestrial retrievals that are probably shockingly advanced, and that we should be learning about it, and that when people hear that there's laughter about the seriousness of some of these subjects, that laughter automatically reveals the people who are throwing stones to either be getting a check from counterintelligence to do that, or the people have absolutely no knowledge.
You've said some amazing stuff. I want to comment on a few and ask a few questions. I just want to give you a heads up. We got about a little over 15 minutes before our first break. First of all, there's two amazing books that you've turned me on to about the alien presence. One of them being Rachel's Eyes. I believe Helen Luttrell was the author, which just blew my mind away to know that there were programs where they were trying to take either a hybrid or it was maybe a full-on ET and mix it in with humans in a college, wearing a floppy hat, sunglasses, and all this other stuff. Like she had like no bones, I remember. And the other book, UFO Highway by Anthony Sanchez. Right. Those two books, I think, knocked me off my socks and blew me out of the water with regards to what I thought I knew. I mean, it seems like the more we go down the rabbit hole, the bigger. Now, with regards to the self-activating software, we did a really fascinating interview about this about a year ago. So if a lot of people want to hear it, you could check it out on the YouTube channel. Again, it's just the same name as this, Dr. J Radio Live. But you talked about this actually going all the way up to Stanford. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the organization called Carrot that was involved in some of this?
This is the whistleblower from 2007, and he called himself Isaac, and it started in May of 2007, and Lex at Coast to Coast AM Radio and Linda Howe at Earth Files, we both received communications about people beginning to have photographs of these strange, and we called them dragonfly drone because they had a larger, from the eye, seeing them in the air, it was like a larger head. I'm not saying it's literal to a dragonfly. It's just that dragonflies have the proportion of these aerial objects. So there is a discernible circle in the front of these objects. Wires come up from the circle, which seem to be involved with some sort of electrostatic interaction. Then coming from the ring, front ring and circle, is a long tapering tail. These have been estimated on the average of 25 feet long. And underneath, panels, boxes, various attachments to the front ring that has all the wires coming up into the air above it, and this tapering tail. Several people in 2007 were able to photograph close enough that we could see that there were patterns of symbols under some of the tails and on some of what are called boxes in one particular series of 12 photographs that were sent to me hard mail as glossy photos, and they were taken at Big Basin Redwood Park in California, and this was in June of 2007. And the man who sent me the 12 prints, his name was Ty Brannigan. He said in a typed letter that he was with other bicyclers, and they were in a group bicycling at Big Basin, and this dragonfly drone-looking thing in the sky flickered in to visibility and flickered out of visibility, in and out. The first time they saw it, startling them, making them wonder what it was. It happened 3 times. It would flicker in and flicker out. And he wrote me, I was so frustrated, I wanted to photograph this. And he said, I took my camera out of a pocket and I hung the strap around my right wrist, hoping that this thing would come back and I'd still be able to get a photo. And it did, and he was able to get 12 photos before it flickered back out into invisibility. And he said that the whole time that the 12 that he's trying to photograph, this Dragonfly drone would rotate clockwise and then reverse counterclockwise and then clockwise and counterclockwise as it was hovering and slowly moving in a motion where they were on a path, and he got those 12 photos. And on the basis of those 12 photos and the symbols that were underneath, they were on the boxes and underneath the tail, I put up all of the photographs at earthfiles.com. I shared the private emails that I was having one-on-one with Isaac, and I put up, as he requested, Lex at Coast and me and anyone who wanted to deal with the documents that he released, that no one would be able to change a word, change a diagram, change an image, if any of us did anything to alter the two documents that he was releasing in the photographs. He would take down his site and we would never have any interaction again. So I've never touched. At Earth Files to this day, part 1 and part 2 of an entire document with photos of extraterrestrial technology at the CARET lab in Palo Alto. CARET is an acronym for Commercial Application Research of Extraterrestrial Technology. The goal, it was a Department of Defense program in which they were trying to work with 200 scientists in an underground facility in Palo Alto. After I had done all this reporting that I'm telling you about, it went on for months, and I ended up with something like 21 eyewitnesses to these Dragonfly drones, going back as far as the 1988 to 89 time period at an Air Force base in Louisiana. There was a widespread of eyewitnesses. But as this went forward, and I am getting communication in addition to what Isaac was releasing, a man who identified himself as working for a large corporation in Palo Alto said, I am trusting that you will not ever share my email, my name. I just want you to know. He said, I have studied everything that you have reported from Isaac about CARET and your own other investigations and reports about other eyewitnesses. And he said, I want you to know the CARET document is real. The lab, I know for a fact, is underground. And in the 80s, if you had been in Palo Alto and you knew what to look for, you would have thought you were passing a library with trees.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's...
Yeah, the installation of all the labs and the DoD and the security with all their guns and all the scientists trying to back-engineer this ET technology that is self-activating was underground.
The fact that it's disguised as a library, and this is just literally in plain sight. I'm sure thousands, tens of thousands of people travel by this all the time, and never would you know what's really going on there. Now, with regards to CARET and the acronym you gave us, the fact that it's the whole operation is to try to reverse engineer this extraterrestrial
and apply it. That is commercial application research of extraterrestrial technology to get extraterrestrial technology patented into American corporations and in our buying and selling world. And isn't that precisely what Philip J. Corso said his job was in 1960s, working for General Trudeau in the Pentagon, who was having Corso hand deliver what were identified as extraterrestrial technology retrieved from a variety of crash sites or disk sites. Some of them weren't even crashes. It was as if the extraterrestrials were putting down craft, almost like, here, take this, see what you can learn from this. And General Trudeau and President Eisenhower's goals were to get extraterrestrial technology as fast as possible inside of hand-picked, selected corporations where only one person might actually know the source, and that if they could get the back engineering patented, that would then protect this physics, this science, in American corporations, keep it out of the hands of perceived human enemies such as Russia and China and so forth, but get it into the American mainstream. But even Colonel Corso told me when we were talking about this in Roswell back in July of 1997 at the 50th anniversary.
Right before he passed away, right?
Yes, he died in 98, and I met him on July 4th, 1997 in Roswell, where I and Stanton Friedman and a few others had been asked to speak in the events that were being covered by television there, and Colonel Corso was just getting his book, The Day After Roswell, out to the world. And we sat down and talked for 3 or 4 hours there, and then I was fortunate enough to spend hours talking with him in Florida later on where he lived. And he stressed that in this effort to get the material that was extraterrestrial, back engineered and patented into corporations so it would be in the American mainstream, that there was a huge disconnect between the black programs that were already way advanced in their effort to understand and apply extraterrestrial technology to military operations and weapons development. And that is probably the most advanced area of all of the ET application on the planet, but that things like fiber optics, semiconductors, lasers, all of that, Colonel Corso said, came from the extraterrestrial technology that we had retrieved.
And Kevlar, and you actually took the word out of my mouth, Corso. Now, a good friend of mine, and I know he's a good friend of yours too. I speak to him on a weekly basis, at least, because we have to really be careful with this gentleman because he is really in his. He is, when we joked about it, he's not in his golden years. He says he's in diamond years. The Honorable Paul Hellyer.
I just think the world of Paul Hellyer.
Yeah, and he is the greatest and the absolute highest former politician in the G8 countries, highest ranking, to talk about this. And what convinced him that all this was real was by reading the book by Philip Corso, The Day After Roswell. Now, the reason why he was able to verify, because a lot of people had their doubts of what Corso was said, was because of his position as the Defense Minister of Canada. He was able to look at the names of the colonels and generals that were written, whose names were in the book, and verify the stories that were in Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. And he was told that everything he read was true. Now, isn't that a scary thought at the end?
Well, John, you need to set that context with why did Paul Hellyer ever have the book The Day After Roswell? It is because a United States Air Force general who knew Paul Hellyer, he actually sent the book to Paul and said, you've got to read this. And then later, after Paul read the book, the Air Force general reinforced that everything in this book is real, and it's not the whole story. There's a lot more. And here's another thing that really impresses me about Paul Hellyer. The very first time that he asked to meet me at a conference, this is going back not long after we all learned about this dialogue and communication he had with a U.S. Air Force general after he had retired from his position of being like the Ministry of Defense in Canada, that we sat down because he sought me out, and he said, I wanted to meet you to ask you questions about animal mutilations and human abductions. And he said, and I want you to know, Linda, as we sat down at a table at this conference, I don't know anything. You've got a lot in your books and your television and your radio, and you know more than I do. But I was in a position in Canada that, for Trudeau, where I should have known everything that you know and more. And Linda, what amazes me is, while I was actually working in the Defense Department in Canada, I never saw a single document, not from the United States or anybody else, about UFO interaction. He said it's only when I left the government and the Air Force General sent me the book The Day After Roswell by Philip J. Corso that my mouth drops open and I start trying to make inquiries. And then we talked about something that was quite fascinating. He brought this up. He said Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister in Canada when I was working in the what would be the Defense Department. And he said, I think everybody understands historically that there was a great deal of tension between the United States government and the Pierre Trudeau government. And it's probably true that the United States didn't want to share anything about UFOs while Trudeau was Prime Minister. Therefore, I, in the Defense Department, would not have received what I should have received about events that were even taking place around our borders. Now, he was so honest about that. He never claimed to have any knowledge while he was actually in the Canadian government. It's after he was out and the general from the United States did him the favor of sending him the book, and then he read it, and he said, Linda, when you read that book, and you understand that the Air Force General who was talking to me said, everything in that book is true and more. That was the kicker, and more. So the layers of knowledge about an alien presence means that it is something that is not Homo sapien, that has been on this planet for an extremely long time, I've been told millions of years, has an underground presence. What is its source? Where is the original, I'm going to say home planet, if it isn't the Earth? And that's where you get to all of the stunning information in Helen Luttrell's book about
you're on television. You're on very many shows that I could think of. You mentioned Sightings from the Past. I remember watching that, and so many others at the time of great era. And not to mention, you have your own radio show. You appear once a month on Coast, and another once every week Thursdays on KGRA. Am I right? And then of course correct all those and plug in everything at this point if you can.
Well, thank you, John. Phenomenon Radio, John Burroughs and I have been doing since July 30th, and now we are at the beginning of November, and we have been seeing our ratings grow and grow and grow, which we are very grateful, and that on Thursday of this week, on the 12th, we are having on Jenny Randall's Dot Street and Brenda Butler from those very early days of the Bentwaters people who were living there, in other words, people in England who were living there and who heard through the grapevine. And it's so interesting that the very first gossip rumors after December 26th to 28th, 1980, from locals to people who were trying to investigate, included always that there had been a UFO and aliens involved in the incidents at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge 26th to 28th. When you go back to all of the earliest writings, and Jenny Randalls did a book with Dot Street and Brenda Butler called Sky Crash. It came out in 1984, and 7 years later in 1991, Jenny did a really actually quite a remarkable follow-up book called From Out of the Blue, the incredible UFO cover-up at Bentwaters NATO Air Base. And the cover, believe it or not, I have one of the original books right in front of me now because we're doing this week, and it shows three gray beings underneath some kind of a craft in some kind of weird light. That was the cover in 1991. Most people didn't know. Most people didn't know this book had been released. And Jenny is going to share with us some of the first-hand interviews that she did with a resident who was there, who saw a huge craft at midnight, right out as Christmas was turning into the December 26th. At 1 o'clock, she talked with people who had first-hand knowledge about the radar operators in Middlesex who were tracking something the size of a 747, but it was going at first at tremendous speed, and then it would slow down, and then it would go at a tremendous speed, and then the radar operators told her that they tracked whatever this was right down toward RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. And it was only last year that the former deputy base commander of RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, Charles Holt, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, went on the record in a press conference when he was back over in Suffolk County to speak that he had confirmed as the former deputy base commander that there were multiple radar films that tracked unknowns, unidentifieds, on the nights of December 26th, 27th, and 28th, all 3 nights, moving into Rendlesham.
In
Now,
1980, of course, 35 years
yeah,
ago.
Exactly. And now, in this program that John and I have been working on, we are trying to look at this as a hugely multifaceted phenomena that had interaction with then NATO's largest air base, jointly operated by the UK and the US, that involved dozens of people, literally. But John Burroughs is the only known person at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge between December 26th and 28th, the only person twice engulfed in the strange light. And the consequences for him, as there have been consequences for many other people there, have only in the last year or two have we gotten documents which talk about unidentified aerial phenomena at Rendlesham Forest near Bentwaters, in which there is non-ionizing frequencies that can, quote, manipulate human minds and damage human tissues. That is the now much talked about Condign project. And what we are trying to do on this 2-hour program each Thursday on KGRA is go deeper with people than most people have ever heard before, and keep widening the scope of where RAF Bentwaters propels us. And we are definitely going to be going into things including quantum physics and time and dimensions and all of that. And so that is one of the big circles in my life. Then the Coast to Coast AM, I do 3 hours the last Thursday of every month, unless it's a holiday like Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then we move it back a week so that I can have a holiday, and George does the same thing. but I'm trying to always be focusing on breaking news in science and environment and real X-Files, and I've been doing that on Coast since 1995, first with Art Bell, and then starting in 2004 with George Norrie, and doing the last Thursday of every month for the last, I think it's 10 years. And then Ancient Aliens, I've done every season of we're starting the 9th season. I will be up working with them in production on the 9th season of Ancient Aliens, and I think that Prometheus Productions in LA is to be commended for trying to take a gentle approach to looking back in history so that people will see as many dots as can be connected together by some of us as possible about issues that relate past and present and probably future related to one or more intelligences interacting with this planet. And I think they've done an excellent series of productions for the History Channel trying to do that. And then Earth Files is sort of my own psychological center ring. I have produced television shows. I've tried to figure it out. I think it's 5,000 radio programs now. And that in the last 15 years, starting in 1999, I began what was sort of a labor of love to complement the work that I was doing in radio and television, so that I could say to people in that late 90s when everybody was turning to the web, please see my in-depth report with images, maps, illustrations, and photographs at earthfiles.com, and remember to think about a reporter who files news about the Earth. That's why I call it Earth Files. And I don't know what I thought would be the evolution of Earth Files, but I can say happily today that over the last 15 years, earthfiles.com is where the beginning of all my research is, that goes out like hubs on a wheel to you, to Coast, to Whitley Strieber in Dreamland, to Ancient Aliens, to conferences. I'm going to be doing this coming weekend, the 13th, 14th, 15th of November. I am an honored producer at the Mississippi International Film Festival in Jackson, and they will be screening a hour that I did and produced a few months ago about all of my research into Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey, where I traveled, and how it ties into this concept of self-activating software that can be in stone, it can be in metal, it can be in crystal, it can be in a variety of substances, as long as certain frequency fields can be applied where the symbols and the patterns are. And throughout the history of this planet, that self-activating software might begin to explain why Stonehenge was built, even the relationship of the pyramids. If you accept what I think is increasingly becoming clear, that 5,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago at Göbekli Tepe, millions of years ago, that there have been non-human intelligences that have interacted with and terraformed this planet for their own ends, their own gains, and how they operate in terms of self-activating software and using frequencies that can neutralize gravity, move 100-ton stones, cause invisibility when they so choose not to be visible to surface Earth life, and can project three-dimensional holograms that the current model of standing-up primate cannot tell. An extraterrestrially projected hologram from something around us that we see every day, and therefore it is the perfect cover for being an alien presence on a planet without the surface Earth life, i.e. humans, knowing even that they are there monitoring, harvesting, and terraforming among us. And that is the key to the whole issue of hybridization. And that hybrids and the hybridization theme, you will be hearing more and more about it. I was just asked to write a comment for a book that will be coming out called Meet the Hybrids. And this is a theme that for some reason it had been talked about 20 years ago, talked a little bit more about 10 years ago, but never really broke into the public until just the last 3 years. And we're going to be hearing a lot more. And I try to say to people, the idea of a human ET hybrid, I'm not afraid of it. I want to understand it. If we're on a planet where there has been an alien presence that's been fighting for its own survival in life for millions of years in different solar systems and ends up here, I would like to understand why. That is the Anthony Sanchez book. Helen Luttrell has the same story, both from Air Force colonels. Everybody on this planet should be exposed to whatever is we'll call it the secret black government knowledge about extraterrestrials getting to Mars, going to Sirius B, coming from Zeta Reticuli, 1 and 2 binary system, all of it that is described in the Helen Luttrell and Anthony Sanchez books. We all need to be exposed to the biggest picture possible so that we are strong in our knowledge and that we won't be broad-sighted in mind, body, and spirit if extraterrestrials are finally introduced on this planet. And everyone wants to know, are there friendlies, are there hostiles? I do not know a single military person that I've ever talked to who hasn't said, it's my understanding there are friendly ETs and there are hostile ETs. It's just like planet Earth. Then we all 7.2 billion humans and counting, we all need to know, who does our government think are friendlies and are helping us, and who do they think are not? Everybody should know this. This is not something to run from or panic over. This is called growing up into adulthood in our relationship with a universe that is not cuddly, that is very difficult to work in and move through unless you get help from the other advanced intelligences.
I'm so glad you brought that up. First of all, let me throw in a couple things. Everybody out there, make sure you do check out the Maze of Deception series that Linda has on YouTube. I believe it's youtube.com/earthfiles. Am I correct?
Well, if there is, I didn't put it there. I've done the Maze of Deception in Earth Files, and it's a huge and very important series from my point of view. What I find, and I don't know what to do about it because my goal is to get information, is that people come and take an awful lot of things from Earth Files, from my videos, from my conferences, and they put them up at YouTube without ever consulting or asking me. And therefore, I guess I'm happy that some of the work that I'm doing a lot of, across what seems like 100 subjects all the time, it gets out into the public. But I've always been trying to control and sustain the quality of what goes out in my name, like the Göbekli DVD production that I'm being honored with at this Jackson, Mississippi Film Festival this weekend. That's 100% my production. And so if somebody has taken my Earth Files work, as far as I'm concerned, the Maze of Deception series is only in Earth Files with some audio, but I have not produced it into a formal DVD or YouTube yet. So I'm not sure what's out there using my work from Earth Files.
Well, nonetheless, everybody be sure you check out earthfiles.com. The fact that you are honored or being honored at the Mississippi Film Festival in Jackson, I think is phenomenal. And you speak globally. That's what's really important. We have a few callers standing by, and then we have so much more to cover, which we could probably go on for weeks, Linda. That's why I love speaking with you. I'm going to go in order. The first one you probably know. This is a Skype caller. He goes by Adam, and from when I spoke to him in the past, you two should know each other.
Okay.
Adam, you still there? You got to unmute, Adam.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go.
Sorry about that. First time Skyping. So, hi, Linda. We talked in 2013 on the telephone, but that was by my birth name. On the internet, I'm using Adam. Okay. So you're probably confused. You don't remember me, but I had a.
Well, if we were able to talk about whatever we did the interview about, I would probably remember. But what I hope the audience will understand that I'm trying every month. I am probably doing recorded phone interviews with at least 20 different people, and you multiply that times 12 months. And if you go back 3 years, you're in hundreds of interviews. And Earth Files is my archive. So if you gave me even a date, and I just look up in my archive, then I will know instantly.
We talked on the telephone for 2 hours when you called me, and it was off air. It wasn't recorded. And you said that you wanted me to do drawings about my Nordic encounter. And the problem was I felt bad about that because I backed away because I wanted to share my experience with you in a recorded interview, but I had trouble committing it to paper. I had not been talking about this for 12 years, and I hadn't been drawing, so it was hard for me to commit it to paper. But I'm working on those sketches, and I mean, I don't know if we have time now to go into any of it, but you know, I am working.
I think what would be valuable, I do sort of try to have every interview that I do for any kind of public work always have sort of as its complement illustrations from the person that I'm interviewing, because over and over again I find that people will say one thing on the phone, and then when I do get illustrations, what they're saying in words is not what they are drawing. And it's the drawings that represent what people remember in their mind's eye. And often they and I learn a great deal more from the illustrations. And so I have found it to be a really valuable part of having illustrations before I do the recorded interviews. And so if you want to send me 1, 2, or 3, or whatever you have, and send it to earthfiles at earthfiles.com. And anybody listening, it's always the same email. It's been the same email for 15 years. Think of a reporter who files news about the Earth. Send me your illustrations to earthfiles at earthfiles.com. And upon receiving them, include your phone number again, and then I can follow up.
That sounds great. I will definitely do that. I've got some crude sketches, but I want to finish them. And I agree with you. The sketches, it helps tremendously to see that. And I had contact with you on Twitter where I had also mentioned road landing experience. But, you know, I did email that to you. But I know you're swamped in the email, so you don't, you know, always have time.
Well, I would like to follow up with you. So
that sounds great.
Yeah, reference tonight. Put in your subject line to me.
I will.
Dr. J, Blonde Illustrations. And I'll tie it to tonight, and I will definitely look for it, and I will follow up. But have a little patience with me right now. I am going to be getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do Phenomenon Radio with Jenny Randalls in England and with John. And then I am going to be editing for upcoming Coast, and then I get on an airplane to go to the film festival, and then when I get back, I will be finishing up editing Four Coasts. And when I get off the radio on Friday the 20th, I have a meeting with somebody on a TV production. So and I only went through that so you'd understand sometimes I'm in a really fast-moving river, and one of them is now. By the 22nd or 23rd, I think that Monday is the 23rd of November, that would be the first time that I can really focus my attention on what you send me.
And Adam, before I let you go, make sure you send her not just what you said you would, but all the illustrations you sent me that I shared with all the listeners when we did the interview with your encounters from back when you were taken in your school and you had the class, the landing. Share them all with Linda.
Yes.
She is the right person. Adam, thank you so much for
will.
calling, and let's get to our
Thank you.
next caller. This one is a phone number, area code 719. What's your name and where are you calling from?
That would be me. This is Kevin in Colorado Springs.
Kevin, nice to hear from you. Do you have any questions for Linda?
Oh, a couple. First of all, Linda, I always enjoy listening to you because you're so full of information every time you do a show.
Thank you.
I would like to go back to what you and Jay started out about, and that was Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
And he's always been known as being a very reclusive type, I guess you'd say.
Right.
And I'm wondering what was the reasoning behind NASA making him the first man on the moon if they had any idea that he was this shy?
Oh,
And
no.
was that-
His friend, the pilot, said it was seeing the 3 silver discs over the crater and being ordered to turn that lamp so that nobody could see them, and that it was that turned Neil Armstrong into a recluse because he felt like he was used and misused.
I see. So it wasn't initially they expected him to be a good PR man for them.
Exactly.
Okay. That's
and then
what I was...
Then he felt like the rest of his life he was a liar.
And then you talked about the hybrids and the hostiles and friendlies.
That's right.
Well, I've always felt like the majority of ET contacts that I've heard of anyway are friendly more than hostile. I
would actually agree that the ratio that has been given by Lynn Buchanan from remote viewing for the Defense Intelligence Agency.
DIA, that's right. We've spoken to a DIA operator here.
Yeah, he would have said that there were far more friendlies than hostiles in the Serpo material. That I think one of the honest pieces of the Serpo material, without question, is the Ronald Reagan briefing at Camp David, March 6 to 8, 1981, and that in there, the CIA director with people from the NSA, the CIA, and the DIA are giving Reagan his first briefing on extraterrestrials. It is definitely worth reading. I've got the entire thing in an Earth Files series, along with illustrations and photographs. And when they break down the non-humans for Reagan, they go into 5. Whether or not they knew more, they made some decision to talk to him about only 5. And what is fascinating to me is that 4 of the 5 are related. 3 of them are all related in this regard. There are the EBANs, the extraterrestrial biological entities that have the pear-shaped heads. That's an important distinction. Their heads are shaped like pears, the larger part at the top coming down and coming into a curved chin, not a pointed chin. And that the extraterrestrial biological entities are credited with very advanced intelligence and having huge skill on doing cloning. And they say in the briefing that the large-nosed, yellow gold-eyed with vertical pupiled beings that are the archeloids, and that they are made by rapid cycle cloning by the Ebens, meaning that the Ebens are supposed to be responsible for mixing and matching genes to create Homo sapien on this planet. Well, they've never stopped mixing and matching genes, and that at least 3 of the extraterrestrial friendlies, 2 of them are made by the Ebens, so the archeloids, and another one that they are products of cloning. And then there is a 4th called hepaloids. They do not go into physical description. It may be the tall blondes. And the 5th, the troncoloids, are quote-unquote nasty insects. Well, that means that you've got a 4-to-1 ratio of 4 groups that are considered friendly to 1. So if that ratio holds up, then we must have a lot of allies that have been helping us against whatever else may be hostile, and that we may be at a position where there's been so much back engineering of weapons that now the United States perhaps feels confident that they don't have a problem in that regard of an attack. But certainly we have the problem that all of the planet has been forced into darkness about the fact that we're not alone in this universe, and that there are all kinds of life forms, and that many of them are friendly.
I would love to. I happen to agree with that statement, Linda, and I think there's so much proof of that, because if they wanted us dead, first of all, they would have wiped us off this planet a long time ago. Yes, yes. And it wouldn't be along the ways of the movie Independence Day. They would have done it in a way to preserve the planet for other uses. As you recall, Bob Lazar said one of the reasons he doesn't want to be the UFO guy is because it would break down the sociology, the human brain, the factor that we are special, religion.
But it's time that Homo sapiens sapien grew
up. That's right.
To
That's
realize
right.
that we're on a planet where a 1% controls the barter system, 1% controls the politically acceptable subjects. That really, really irritates me, and that we need to get past this. 1% should not be keeping us all dumb and blind. It doesn't even matter if some of the original reasons for doing that were, quote-unquote, benign, so that poor, dumb, blind Homo sapiens, sapien humans would not be jumping off of cliffs. And, it drives me crazy. We're not that weak. We're not that stupid. We are a species that should be given the respect of truth and honesty
that we all deserve. And who gives the 1% the power to speak on our behalf? It's disgusting. Linda, we have a little over 20 minutes left. Okay. I want to go on whatever topics you want. There's a few more that I would love to touch base with. Before we went to break, first of all, you mentioned a very important fact that the person who was in charge of Rachel in Rachel's Eyes by Helen Luttrell was an Air Force colonel. And same thing with UFO Highway. Right. Sanchez contact was an Air Force colonel. Now, let me ask you this question.
Who died, metaphorically. It's just like the Cooper Stein at the citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club on May 2013. He was briefly introduced in a tiny short video, but he was a man that I spent 2.5 days with in 1998 at his home in Florida, and that he said that for him to get out of the CIA extraterrestrial monitoring group, that they had to kill him.
Wait, are you speaking about the guy who went by anonymous?
Yeah, that is my story, my research, 20 parts at Earth Files. At the citizen hearing, they introduced it in a different way, but it is all work that I had done with him, and because he was threatened, after I left his house, I was going to get a crew and come back, videotape him, and sign that it would all be for posthumous release in television that I was going to produce and work, because he thought he was dying from diabetes. So did his wife when I was there in 1998. So he lived long enough to have the little video done at the citizens' hearing in 2013, and that I've been told that because that my presence in his home caused so many problems between him and government agents that showed up threatening him, specifically not to talk with me, that all those many years later, that in 2013 when Bassett and Company did a little video to present at the press club, that they thought it would be better for me not to be the person who would do the interview. I disagree. I think historically it would have been perfect to come around full circle at the end of his life and have, since I had done 2.5 days of interviews with him, that I knew what he had told me, and that it would have been, I think, richer historically. But nevertheless, I was thrilled to see that he finally, because he has passed, that at the end of his life, that he at least was able to be on video at what I thought was a very important event, the National Press Club citizen hearing. I was very happy to be a participant in several of those panels presenting to the retired congresspeople, and that when he had the little video, when you know what I know that he told me, and that I have these 20-some parts at Earth Files transcribed from the 17.5 audio tapes that I recorded with him, and that he stressed that in order for him to be able to leave the unit in which he was, in his cover was being an Army cryptographer, and he told in detail about the autopsies on extraterrestrial bodies that they watched. They had film that was coming in from around the world. They were working tightly with Fort Belvoir in Langley, Virginia. His boss was from Langley, Virginia. It was a CIA unit pretending to be Army cryptography, and that he was in it for 4 years, went to Area 51, saw a gray alien in a one-way mirror where his boss and a couple others were inside of a room with one of the grays, communicating telepathically only, and that he wanted out. He did not want to spend the rest of his life dealing with the UFO ET subject matter. And his boss told him that the only way that he could get out of this CIA extraterrestrial unit devoted to studying, monitoring everything related to ETs on this planet, they would have to, quote-unquote, kill him, meaning he would have to die, have a death certificate and all of that, and then continue living under a different name, a different everything, and that they did arrange that for him. That is exactly what the colonel told Anthony Sanchez that he had to do in order to release the information in UFO Highway and continue to live on this planet.
And you're absolutely right. Two things. With regards to UFO Highway, Sanchez says that the moment the book was to be published, that colonel had to, quote-unquote, die, like you said. And back to the anonymous, that's the way I refer to him, because that's what I was introduced to him in 2013.
That I wrote him. He asked me to call him Cooper, K-E-W-P-E-R. So in my work at Earth Files, when in 2008 I had received a letter that turned out to be false, a letter informing me that Cooper Stein, that was a made-up name, that he had died. I released in his honor the 20-part series at Earth Files in 2008. And then I learned that he had not died and that he wasn't physically at the citizen hearing. It was the little video that they presented of him. But then I realized that he was still alive in 2013, and I was able to talk with his son-in-law and eventually his son about him, and hoping that there would be some way that we could get together. But then he did pass. And so the whole thing is bittersweet to me, because I spent a very long time thinking that no one in the planet knew where I was in 1998. My family didn't know where I was. Nobody knew where I was, but the government can track all of us anywhere, anytime. And the very fact that after we spent all of this valuable time and I had recorded all of this audio tape, and he was enthusiastic about my coming back, which would have been then August of 1998, with a film crew, as long as it would be posthumous. And I completely agreed. And then they come and threaten him twice. They come and threaten him and use my name and say that he's never to speak to Linda Moulton Howe again if he wants to see his son marry and have children. That was the threat.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because he even brought up that your name, that when he was leaving a grocery store, he was approached and told that. Now, let me ask you this.
And see, by 2013, none of that threat would have mattered. His son was married. All of that had happened. It was these many years, from 1998 to 2013. That's why it would have been historically wonderful for the videotape crew to have me have spent time with him. It would have been like re-seeing an old friend, and I knew all the ground that we had covered. But at least I have everything transcribed from all of my audio tapes at earthfiles.com, and it is the honest representation of everything he told me.
And that is honestly priceless. I have to say, priceless to have that information with Cooper. Now, when Cooper said that Eisenhower summoned him to his office, where Vice President Nixon at the time was with him, I believe it was 58, with Cooper's CIA boss, I guess, because they were both, like you said, in the same CIA unit. And apparently, as you know, 52, Truman wrote the Eisenhower briefing memo. Well, then all of a sudden, you have this briefing memo and from 52, so Eisenhower is in this program. Then 58, Cooper says that he was summoned to the presidential, to meet with the president, maybe in the White House, and said that he's not getting...
they were going to meet in the Capitol, and then it was moved to the old Defense Secretary. It was one of the older buildings. They decided not to have the meeting in the Capitol. Remember that?
Yes.
And they had a meeting in another building nearby with Eisenhower.
To keep it private. Right?
And there was another meeting in the Oval Office in which Cooper and his boss from the CIA were in the Oval Office. They were waiting with some documents and photographs. Nixon was there and Eisenhower, and that the first group was from the FBI. And there was a meeting with the FBI on UFO-related matters, and then they moved to Cooper and his boss, and that it was in that meeting that Cooper got the first realization that Eisenhower had told him and his boss things that he was not going to address in the meeting with Nixon. Nixon was not hearing everything that Eisenhower knew.
Now, let me pose this question to you after I pose this, what realization I had. Just to give you a heads up, we got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to
Okay.
try to cram as much as possible. When Eisenhower told Cooper that Area 51 had stopped providing him information, that he was going to invade with,
Oh.
I believe, the First Army unit in
Okay,
Colorado.
that was in that little video that they showed at Citizen Hearing.
Yeah.
I can say that without any question, in 1998, in those 2.5 days at his house, he never said that then. I wonder if it was because when they did that little video for the 2013 Citizen Hearing, he was already so much sicker. See, he was on shots. He was having to stop every 3 or 4 hours to do shots.
Yeah, he had a 6-month lifespan at that point, I believe, right?
Yeah,
even less.
In 1998, we thought, his wife told me she thought he was going to pass and that she was grateful that I was willing to do a videotape that could be on television of him with a document that would be legally posthumous. Then in 2013, the fact that he was still alive was wonderfully amazing, but I could see in the video that
How
they had
sick
done
he
this
was.
short video in a hotel or motel room. I could tell that he was not of mind.
Well,
He was extremely sharp. I mean, the guy was really smart, and his mind was detailed and fast in 1998. In 2013, it was slow, and he was not sharp. And therefore, I'm not sure if that was something that had been colored his mind, or that it was something that was conflated with something else, a discussion that had nothing to do with what he told me in 1998. I don't know. Now, people have said who claim that they knew Eisenhower well and that he was a no-nonsense man. I think that's a very fair statement.
That's right. The supreme leader, of the Allied leader of World War II.
Yeah, and Eisenhower was one hell of a what do you want to call it? He was substantive. He had a lot of strength, morally and in his brain and his body. And that I've heard one man, when I was talking about this, that he never said that to me in the time that I was there. This is something that was just in that Citizen Hearing video. But one person said, who had known Eisenhower in their work, that it was not outside of the ballpark for Cooper to have thought those words, that Eisenhower, if he were denied getting into Area 51, Cooper would imagine that Eisenhower would take a military operation and go and reclaim Area 51, because Eisenhower was so fed up and so angry about the fact that he, Anthony Barden was the boss's name of Cooper, and that Anthony Barden and Cooper, according to Cooper, had discussed the fact that Eisenhower did not trust the CIA at all, thought that the CIA was a threat because of
and
spies.
Out of control, right?
Out of control, filled with spies, and that this is why Eisenhower turned to General Trudeau, set him up in 1958 to be the head of R&D for the Army.
With Corso.
At that point, Corso said the only people that General Eisenhower / President of the United States trusted, because this is a strong statement, the only people he trusted were the men he had known in World War II in the Army.
Well, let me try to merge as much as I can because we do got about 5 minutes left. The reason why I've always wondered why did Eisenhower in 1961 say beware of the military-industrial
I
complex?
think it's exactly this issue.
Yes, exactly.
He
Thank you.
knew.
Was
He
it
knew that
because
the United States was turning into this Swiss cheese underbelly, black projects, black programs, and he and Truman obviously had set some of it in motion, but I think that Eisenhower himself was aghast
cut out
at what was happening,
right?
and that was his warning, and that you can see whether it's metaphor, whether it was a thought, whether Cooper had ever heard with Anthony Varden at all ever about Eisenhower saying he would physically, forcefully claim Area 51. It's a thought. It's a metaphor for the thought of how serious things had gotten, and that Cooper could imagine that Eisenhower would take a military unit into Area 51 and reclaim it for the United States because it had gotten so disconnected from having any oversight by what we call our representative government.
And that's a really scary thought. Linda, we have literally about 3 minutes left before I want to ask you for a final statement. I want to see if I can get this. This is trending a lot, especially because it came from earthfiles.com. If you don't think we don't have enough time to cover it, you let me know. Maybe we could do it another time. What about this new posting from today about the FLIR thermal imaging of the Great Pyramid of Giza, revealing the impressive anomaly on the east side?
This is a great story, and because we are short on time, I just want to say I've got that headline at Earth Files, but I have done an interview with a Yale archaeologist who has spent 20-some years working in Egypt archaeologically. No matter how bad it's been politically, the archaeologists have still been there working. It is a fascinating interview that will be, I believe it's my lead half hour in Coast on Thursday, November 19th. And I will be doing illustrations, photos, all kinds of things. And the bottom line is, this is perhaps the first time where the FLIR thermal camera has been used to look at Cheops, and they have found in this research that there are 3 areas in Cheops, one on the ground layer and one in the upper half, that are showing warmer. The stones are warmer than all the other limestones around it. That means, they think, that there are hollow spaces behind these stones that are showing up red in the FLIR, and that could mean that there is something, who knows, there could be treasures, there could be something in those spaces, or, as the Yale archaeologists told me with great enthusiasm, none of us really knows how the pyramid was built, and that it could be that these are spaces having to do with internal spiraling ramps that were used to build Cheops from the inside out. And I'm not trying to argue with him and say, well, it was probably extraterrestrials with discs that just neutralized gravity and put the stones in place. Right now, we're still in an Earth where academically the line is drawn in the sand that the limestone blocks were put in place. But it is still a huge mystery even how that was done, and that this new thermal work on Cheops that will they're going to continue doing this work all the way through 2016. We could finally be in 2016 for the first time in 4,500 years having an accurate insight about how some of those blocks were even put together at the center.
Can you believe that thousands of years later, even more of these mysteries, create more mysteries. This is why this is such an important topic. And Linda, as you mentioned earlier, us Homo sapiens have the right to know. And more importantly, we have every reason to know that, and we shouldn't allow this 1%.
The truth.
That's right. The truth. We deserve the truth. Linda, it's been such a fascinating time as always. And I wanted to give you this last minute so you can give the audience a final thought. And of course, let's plug in your information one last time.
Well, thank you, John, Dr. J. It's a pleasure to work with you on your radio program and to let everybody listening know if you have a story that is firsthand in any of the Earth Mystery categories, please email me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. And I hope everybody listening will go to earthfiles.com. It is my news website that I always try to ground in as much pressure of fact as I possibly can in medicine, in science, in environmental issues, and then the huge real X-Files that are now from 1999 to 2015 at earthfiles.com. I will be approaching 3,000 in-depth reports with 60,000 some images in this coming year. It is like a huge encyclopedia, but it is also active daily news, and I encourage everyone to go to earthfiles.com, and thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Linda. Again, I also want to thank the Dr. J Radio Live team and my co-host, Johnny Webb, where it's 5 a.m. now in London. Especially, I want to thank you, the listener. Remember, disclosure is in your hands. There's only so much we can do as journalists, investigators, witnesses. It's up to you guys to take this information, share it, and get the rest of the 7.2 billion people on this planet.
Get the pressure on your congressman.
Yes. And you know what? Speaking of that, I've been getting a lot of them, recordings, and a sitting congressman, Brad Sherman, has agreed to an interview. And fortunately, we have him set up. Sadly, it's only 20 minutes, but he will be coming. So much more. Everybody.
Oh, that's so good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't forget, everybody, Thursday, John Lear will be back. Unfortunately, because of his age, he'll only be on for the first hour. If you guys want open lines the second hour, let me know. Otherwise, I will book someone else. Remember, for the YouTube exclusives, don't forget, Nassim Harriman video has just been released. The Dr. Greer video from last week, part 1 and part 2, will be released tonight. They were made, ready, uploaded, set to go. Also, don't forget that Jim Mars will be coming up soon. Jaime Maussan was very kind to provide me with 500 plus videos to use for these amazing interviews on YouTube. And remember, about 350 more interviews will be uploaded onto YouTube. A lot of them here from Dark Matter, more than 150, plus another 150 from Revolution Radio, and then another 50 or so exclusive. All you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com, drjradiolive.com, and also youtube.com/drjradiolive. With that being said, this is Dr. J signing off.